Okay, imagine this for a moment, a cryptocurrency, right? But one where experts are trying to build in a specific value, like hard-coded in. We're talking potentially hundreds of thousands per coin.
Hmm,
And then get this, there are maybe daily spending limits too. So even just a few coins could be, well, incredibly significant.
that's quite a hook.
Welcome everyone to The Deep Dive. This is where we take your sources, dive right in, and pull out the key bits of knowledge you need. Fast.
Glad to be diving in.
So today, we're looking at the Pi network, specifically these really complex things called supernodes, how Chainlink fits in, which seems crucial,
Absolutely.
and what all this means for its value and maybe how you'd actually, use it day to day. It looks different.
It certainly aims to be.
Our mission then is to cut through some of that complexity, understand the big vision here, and uncover these details that suggest Pi might not be like other cryptos you've heard about.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Okay, let's unpack this. So to really get Pi, we apparently have to start with this foundation piece, the supernode. The sources describe it as incredibly complex, almost like the heart of the whole blockchain system.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, it's presented as essential, the core infrastructure. And the complexity is real, even for people deep in blockchain development. It's intricate stuff.
And we're not talking about something quickly thrown together.
No, definitely not. You've got computer scientists, experts, including Nicholas Koukoulas, who's a co-founder and programmer.
Right.
They're actively building this, and they're not just looking at next year. The sources suggest they're planning like 8 to 15 years ahead.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, it's foundational work for the Web3 world they're envisioning. That next-gen internet based on decentralization. It's a serious, long-haul technical project.
And it's not being built in isolation, is it? The sources mentioned it pulls in other tech.
Exactly. It incorporates elements from other significant projects. Chainlink is mentioned specifically as being critical.
Okay.
And Stellar also gets a nod, likely for its transaction processing capabilities. And this integration, this is where it starts to get really interesting.
Right. So let's talk about Chainlink. What's its job in this Pi ecosystem?
So Chainlink essentially acts as a bridge, a vital one. Its main function is to securely transfer data from the Pi blockchain out to the external world.
The real world, basically. Outside the blockchain itself.
Pretty much. To people, systems, anything off-chain. That's how the Pi blockchain is designed to interact with real-world stuff, real values.
Okay, how does it actually do that? The sources say it records every single transaction.
That's the idea presented. It logs all the activity on the Pi blockchain. Think about those examples, like someone buying coffee.
Yeah, or a shirt using
Right.
Pi through this GCV thing, global consensus value.
Right, or other marketplace buys. Chainlink is designed to capture all that transaction data.
So it sees someone spent, say, 0.001 Pi on coffee. Someone else spent 1 Pi on a marketplace item.
Precisely. It collects data from potentially thousands of these transactions. The source mentioned examples like 11,000 GCV transactions, maybe 25,000 marketplace ones at all sorts of prices, $1.60 and 70 cents, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Then it takes all that data, crunches the numbers, averages out the prices observed in those transactions, and publishes a daily average price for Pi on its network, its Oracle network.
So the source gave that hypothetical example. Chainlink might publish 1 Pi equals $205 for a given day.
Exactly, that kind of specific daily average.
And the point of that is transparency,
Yeah.
building confidence.
That seems to be the goal, yes. Transparency. When the outside world, people not yet on Pi, see these published average prices based on actual use.
Right.
The idea is it encourages more people to, take a look, understand the Pi blockchain, and hopefully get involved. It draws them into the ecosystem.
Okay, that makes sense. But you said it's not just tracking value, it's about setting it.
Well, this is where it gets really distinctive.
Yeah.
It's about how they intend to validate a specific value.
Which brings us to, well, something quite startling from the sources. This programmer, Dimas Noy, he's apparently been looking at new code from Nicholas Koukoulas, found on GitHub. And what he described, it sounds almost unlike any other crypto.
It really does. The detail he apparently found in Chainlink's tests is, it's that the code is configured to validate a value of $314,159 per Pi coin.
Wow. $314,159. That's incredibly precise. It's not just a market guess.
No, it appears to be a very deliberate figure, almost, as you said earlier, philosophical. It hints at a completely different way of thinking about digital currency value.
And the sources emphasized how strict this is in the tests.
Extremely strict. During these tests, the system, the supernode, the blockchain, it's programmed to automatically reject any transaction trying to use a value higher than $314,159.
So no $400,000 transactions per pi.
Rejected. But just as importantly, it also rejects any value lower than $314,159. So you couldn't just decide to transact at $200,000 either.
So it has to be exactly that number for the transaction to be valid in these tests.
That's what the tests indicate, yes. A highly specific, predetermined value being enforced by the code.
Now, you stress these are tests. It's not live yet.
Absolutely crucial point. These are tests of the code's logic. It's not launched or activated. It's about the intended design for the future, whether that's near or far.
But it raises a huge question, doesn't it? How does a fixed value like that even work in the crypto world we know, which is all about market dynamics?
It fundamentally challenges it, and it connects to the broader idea of control within the network.
Right. How do they maintain that kind of value control while still being, decentralized? Isn't that a contradiction?
That's where the architecture comes in. The supernodes, the regular nodes, the smart contracts, they're all designed, according to the sources, to work together.
To do what? Just validate the price?
That, but also to ensure what they call fair decentralization. And, importantly, to prevent cheating or fraud. This complex system is meant to exert control over transactions, but in a distributed way.
So it's not one person flipping a switch. It's the network itself enforcing the rules.
Exactly. Think of thousands of these nodes independently checking transactions against the rules, including that potential value rule. It makes it incredibly hard for any single actor or small group to cheat or manipulate things. It's distributed control, aiming for integrity.
Okay.
Yeah.
And part of that control system involves something really surprising: daily spending limits.
Yes, that was another key aspect highlighted. The system is apparently being programmed with restrictions on how much pi, in dollar terms, you can actually transact per day.
So even if you had a lot of pi, you couldn't just spend it all at once.
Apparently not. The current programmed limits mentioned in the sources are a minimum of $10 per day
Okay.
and a maximum of $10,000 in daily transactions.
$10,000 a day.
Now, the sources are careful to note these specific numbers in the code might change before anything goes live, but the concept of a daily cap seems embedded in the design.
That is really different. Why would they do that?
Well, it leads to some pretty profound implications about ownership and wealth.
How so?
It suggests this almost counterintuitive idea. If pi were to reach that very high value, and you have these daily spending caps, then owning just 10 pi coins could potentially be enough to provide significant financial stability, maybe even for generations.
Just 10, because you can only spend so much per day anyway.
Precisely. The high value combined with the spending limit changes the equation. Owning, say, 10,000 pi or even 1,000,000 pi, sure, that's obviously a massive amount in potential value.
Right, you could help a lot of people secure your family for ages.
Absolutely. But the daily spending power isn't unlimited, unlike having millions in a traditional bank account, perhaps. The caps fundamentally alter what having vast wealth means in this specific context.
It's less about just hoarding massive amounts and more about controlled, sustainable use.
That seems to be the philosophy behind it. If 10 pi could provide $10,000 worth of spending power per day at that target value, well, that's a very different model than just accumulating as much as possible. It potentially focuses more on long-term utility.
It kind of reminds me of the stories about early Bitcoin.
How so?
Well, back in 2009, 2010, you could get Bitcoin easily, cheaply. Now, trying to buy even one coin is incredibly expensive for most people.
That's a parallel the sources seem to draw. The idea is that pi might follow a similar path. Right now, maybe you can acquire a good number of pi through mining on the app.
Yeah.
But if, and it's still an if, the supernodes activate, the mainnet launches with these kinds of features, and it gains global adoption.
Then getting even one pi coin could become much, much harder and more expensive later on.
That's the projected trajectory. It would become a scarce asset by design, but its utility managed through these controls like spending limits.
And throughout all this, the sources emphasize a kind of trust in the process, right? Trust in the experts building it.
Yes, there's definitely a thread of relying on the technical expertise of Koukkalis and the team developing this complex supernode project. The message seems to be, this is complicated, but it's being built meticulously by people who know what they're doing.
So, wrapping our heads around this, what does it all mean for you, the listener, trying to understand this potential future.
Well, we've certainly taken quite the dive today.
We have. We looked at the Pi network's core, the supernodes, Chainlink's role in bridging to the real world and potentially setting value.
That surprising target value of $314,159 per Pi seen in tests.
Right, and this revolutionary idea, really, of built-in daily spending limits.
So you should now have a clearer picture, hopefully, of how this project is trying to build something different. A digital currency aiming for fairness, control, maybe incredible value.
But where wealth isn't just about how much you have, but about a managed, potentially sustainable flow.
Exactly. It's a very different model being proposed.
Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Consider this. If cryptocurrencies can be designed like Pi seems to be aiming for, with hard-coded values, with daily limits, how might that fundamentally reshape our economic systems in the future? Could we see other digital assets trying similar things to, say, control inflation or ensure wealth is distributed more equitably?
Or maybe control volatility. Lots of possibilities.
Definitely something to mull over. What other strategies might emerge in this space? We'll leave you with that until our next deep dive.